Hello, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Corridor Talk, a series of discussions about the most important topics the industry forgets to talk about. I've got an incredible introductory cast of guests for this panel. We have Jim Rossignol, who co-founded a little games journalism website that some of you may have heard of, Rock Paper Shotgun, back in 2007. And has since been a very widely read and published author and journalist, and more recently, well, I say recently, I think it's been about 10 years now, one of the co-founders of Big Robot, who have made such amazing games as Signal from Tolva and You, Sarah Being Hunted. We're also joined by Silvia Gaetano, who's a many-year veteran of community management, player support, social media, and writing in the industry, and is most recently of Cock Media. And also Tomas Sala, who has spent many years running an indie studio before pivoting to start his own solo project, which was released recently on basically everything now, which is the Falconeer. So, hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining me, as I said, on this inaugural episode. The idea, as I've said, and will be written somewhere in the text for this, is just to have some real talk basically about the stuff that the industry doesn't normally deal with in much detail. And today the topic is resilience and fragility, the flip side. And I'll just kick off with a question to you all, not that you all have to answer, but still. I figure let's start with a little bit of nomenclature. I'd love to know how each of you define resilience and what resilience kind of means to you.
Well, shall I go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jim.
Well, I think there's sort of two aspects to this. Taking that as our topic. One is the sort of issue of personal resilience as individuals working on their stuff, and then the other is the sort of the resilience of the thing that we're working on, which generally is as much the studio and the fact that we're able to make stuff as it is the individual projects, and that those two things are definitely interwoven and interlinked, right? That you need people to be healthy and working at their best for the wider project to also have an element of resilience to it. So you want your studio to be resilient, and that means resilient people working within it. That's how I understood your pitch for us for this discussion anyway. And if I've got it dramatically wrong at this point,
then you can leave. No, that's absolutely it. And that relationship and the distinction between the resilience of a person and the resilience of an organization or a project, and how technology affects that, is definitely something I was hoping to get into. So thank you for that. What about you, Silvia?
For me, resilience, especially coming from like a social media and community management background, also involves a lot of having thick skin and really kind of pushing through certain things that you may not really be happy with or really be comfortable with, and you kind of are resilient in the sense that you really push through that and become stronger on the other side.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is exactly why I thought it'd be really valuable to have someone like you from that kind of very forward-facing social media, you're on the front lines perspective. Tomas, how about you?
I like what Jim said, is that for me everything is meshed into one. It's a business, it's a personal passion, it's a tiny studio, tiniest of studios. But I like in Dutch, resilience is veerkracht, which is the power of a spring. So it's not about if it's a roller coaster, and it is a roller coaster no matter what. There's ups and downs. There's always this, when you say resilience, you might want to flatten the curve, as it were, and keep the bad things away and the good things. But that's not really reality. So it's about you're gonna get hit, and you then springing back up so you can get on that upward trajectory, and then you're going to get hit again. I think for me, resilience is it's not one thing that hits you, but it is the sequence of things that keep coming at you. Depending on your situation. Before I didn't have kids, now I've got kids. That changes stuff. You've got a family. There's all these different things, but you're always having to sort of bounce up. So for me, resilience is that. It's like the spring. It's like a waveform. It's about getting up after, because especially someone like me, you're always going to go and bottom out at points.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I like that imagery and that definition. So let's get a little bit specific. Obviously, no one needs to name any names or gonna kind of go into too many gory details. But yeah, I would love to hear from each of you. An example of a time in the games industry that you felt that you overcame. Something, as Tomas says, there's all the little bumps along the road that everybody experiences. But sometimes a bigger bump comes along. So either an example of something like that you overcame, some emotional or otherwise setback, or a general time and period. Maybe it was wider trends in the industry or something that you felt required a lot of resilience to get through.
Well, I've got one example of that I'm happy to talk about a bit. We did the Signal from Tolva a few years ago now, 2017 that came out, and it was our probably, what was it, 1, 2, 3, it was our 4th actual game, but it was the second one that felt like a big deal. It was the second one that we'd had the proper team for, and it was our solo project, and it was the follow-up to the Silvia Being Hunted, which was hugely successful, and it was also where internally a lot of the responsibility for it had shifted onto me, and I'd taken that on quite willingly. And I think from working on Rock Paper Shotgun, and I was actually still the publisher and nominally the editor of Rock Paper Shotgun through most of the development of that, and I find writing really easy. Which sounds like it's a terrible boast, but I think it gave me, when I was working on RPS and editing as well, and I love doing both. It gave me a real kind of macho bullshit idea of how productive I was. Like I had a real kind of sense, and I really kind of centered on my personal productivity as being huge, and I made a big deal of that. And when we were making the Signal from Tolva, I just overstretched myself, like just unbelievably, because I'd had this kind of unearned sense of self-confidence about doing this stuff, and I figured that what I was very capable with and overproductive with in one area, I would simply be able to spread to others. And I did level design and a whole bunch of other stuff on that project, which wore me out to a degree that I really wasn't expecting at all. And we ended up selling Rock Paper Shotgun at roughly the same time that we launched the game. And I did not accommodate for that at all in terms of my personal workload. I just simply worked later and took on more hours. And the effect of that was total burnout, which affected not just both of those projects, but my personal life, who I felt I was. Because I was disappointed in myself when I realised I couldn't, meet my own expectations for how productive I was, and as it kind of ground on, my productivity crashed, which made the situation worse. I just didn't feel I could work. I had no motivation to work. I had no energy to work. And I think what was most galling about that is that I didn't understand what was happening in any way. Like I'd never experienced it before. I didn't see it coming. I didn't really understand what was happening. I had no kind of sort of perspicacity towards the situation, and it took taking a really serious amount of time off, like months of time off, and then seeing a therapist and talking about it and telling them, and they were like, "Well, it sounds like you burnt out spectacularly." I was like, "Yeah, it does, doesn't it?" And that kind of inability to diagnose what the problem was was extremely damaging. And since then, I think understanding that I wasn't invincible and having limitations has become extremely important to me. And I think I'd read accounts of friends and other people in the industry and stuff burning out, hitting the buffers and really suffering from it. And I didn't really understand what they were talking about, and I had no empathy or sympathy for that. And then having gone through that, wow, I really do now. And I think noting that and now taking that into account in my own life also has changed how I view how other people report their situation. Not just people I'm working with directly, but when other people are talking about their own experiences, having an understanding of that has sort of changed. Perhaps not so much on the resilience thing that you're talking about, but certainly the fragility side. I definitely have a kind of deeper understanding of that, having gone through it more. But I also have a kind of more cautious sense of other people's ability when they say how much work they can do or what they can take on, and also what when I talk to people about, say, working from home or what their workload is likely to be across a project and things like that, trying to mentally accommodate the fact that they're going to become a parent during that period, or a lot of other things that would simply not have been on my radar as a younger as a younger person, and a less experienced manager. Now all that has sort of come into focus for me, and consequently, it's one of the things I try to talk to people about is, especially when they report the kind of symptoms that I suffered during that period, is to say, well, to talk to them about burnout and talk to them about, the lack of invincibility that we all actually have, and the sort of dangers that fragility and that kind of expectation to push too hard, especially when it comes from yourself, and where that can lead. And I think I think that's an ongoing thing in games. There's lots of people who hit that kind of situation and are often either expected to push too hard from sort of crunch environments, or put that on themselves because especially where we're working in the indie space, you put an enormous amount of pressure on yourself to make this thing happen because it's your project, it belongs to you, and the responsibility lies there. And learning to spot that stuff coming, and then also forgiving yourself for that, I think has been really important to me over the last few years.
I think what you just said about forgiving yourself at the end there is really crucial. I think it's so easy to blame yourself and to hate yourself, right, for making mistakes or for not living up to your own kind of internal ideal of productivity. Is that something, Tomas and Silvia, that you agree with?
Should I? Yeah. It's something that I really relate with, especially when you kind of set your own goals and you really want to achieve certain things and then realize maybe I don't have the bandwidth, maybe I don't have the energy to do all of this. So I definitely related with all of that, and it really takes a long time, or longer than you want, to acknowledge the fact maybe I'm burning out, or maybe I'm in the process of burning out. I don't really know how to explain it because I've obviously lived through more resource-intensive times in my life when it comes to work, where I really try to achieve more than I can. Sorry, I'm having kind of like a brain moment. And it's just, I don't think that I've burned out. And listening to other people talk about it, you never really know, am I in the situation where I'm burning out? Am I in the situation where I really need to kind of take a mental break and really figure out, okay, these things I can't really all do by myself. So I definitely really appreciate the fact that, Jim, you mentioned going to a therapist. a lot of time people kind of see that, and it's getting better in the industry. People see the idea of going to a therapist as maybe, I don't want to say being weak, but maybe having given up, or maybe not
Giving
being
in.
as strong. Yeah, giving in, maybe not being as strong as you want to be. But it's definitely something that I would encourage more people to do. Really kind of talk also to your industry colleagues. Talk also not just within your own company, but other people who also do the same job as you. So, for example, for community managers, we have kind of an industry server where we talk to each other, and then we realize, oh yeah, the level of work that you're doing is more manageable than what I'm doing. Maybe I should be taking a time out, or maybe really listening to my own body as well, and my mind. So I definitely relate to a lot of the things that you mentioned. Yeah.
It's funny because I both of you, the things you said, I have a little chuckle, and it's not, I'm laughing at, but it's reminding me of so much I've been through. You know, going through a therapist for the first time, which is actually for me, now that once you've done it, it's why haven't I done this? You know, when I was 25 or 35, why had it be 38 and like burned out on out for 6 months. And then go see a therapist and figure out not just some burnout. For me, it was all these things. It was a burnout for myself, and then I went to a therapist. And after a while, the therapist said, "Well, we can do this test, but I'm pretty sure what's going to come out." And we did a test for ADD and ADHD, and I suddenly realized, "Oh fuck, I'm having a burnout." And not everybody, processes everything the way I do. Fuck. And that's you're pretty old at 38 to actually figure that one out. So for me, that's so recognizable. And then what you said, you have to forgive yourself at some point because you're down and you basically failed. For me, it was like I failed at running a company, failed at being a success, failed at being a leader of any shape because I was just incapable of, doing that. And I just, I had, the burnout where you're on the couch and every time you get stressed, you just want to sleep. Your brain wants to go sleep. So I did that for a long time, and then with therapy, and then to figure out that, there's things that are an intrinsic part of you which are blocking you from performing the functions that were expected of you. That took a long time to process, get over. I think I only got productive years later, so I'm about 44. So at least 2-3 years before I could, and it actually for me it meant just saying, okay, I can't do all those things. I don't want to do another fucking Scrum course or a management traineeship or get another coach in to teach me how to lead people. Or it's I will never be interested in being part of your meeting for longer than 5 minutes. I will never be interested in making your lists or to-dos or whatever. That's a structure that doesn't work for me. And I just said, fuck it. I don't want to do any of that anymore. I only create unhappy people around me, and I create an unhappy person for myself. And then what you said about forgiveness. For me, that meant there was a lot of anger built up with that. If you stay too long in a situation where you're trying to adapt, and then you start lashing out, because that's for me ahead of the burnout. Everybody has their own sort of negative dark bit. For me was a lot of anger. So I got angry, frustration became anger. So some people get frustrated inside. I got pretty snippy. But it's also, frustrated with people say, well, why don't you do this like this? Well, in Scrum, and get a Scrum Master over, because that's what everybody wants to be hyper organized. And then you walk away from something with business partners and a business, and the business is, that's something that's been part of your life, I think, for 17 years at that point. That creates more anger. So then you might be past your burnout, but and then there's the anger in yourself, because you also know you've, in your frustration, treated people not in the way they should deserve to be treated. And then comes the biggest fucker for me is, and there's this thing which it's not a mentally breaking thing, but it's big enough for you to have been a significant chunk in this path to where you're at now. And it's not something you could ever do, being aware of it, but it shaped your entire life, relationships, evolution as a person. And there's no, how do you call it? There's no, then you have to forgive yourself for the life you've led. I can't say it anywhere else. Shit. And I think that is, getting out of that is resilient. Let's put it like that. And it turns you into, going through that. Maybe it's just a midlife crisis and all that stuff. It's a certain age where all the doors are getting slammed in your face, and there's no, unless you adapt and become literally a better, more empathic person with more, how do you call it, care for other people. Where you can, for me, it felt after all of this, and then slowly waking up again and starting to do stuff, it felt okay. I can see other people where in the past I didn't actually see them. I would visually see them, but not, recognize them for what's happening inside of their minds, which is a dreadfully locked in perspective if you're looking at myself back then. So I recognize a lot in what's been said, and like therapy, it is, some of this stuff you cannot figure out by yourself. And because there's so many people that done that, there's experience, there's, and the amount of, even now I go on Twitter, I leave threads by people and say, oh, this is a part of my life, is a part of your life. I go, oh, that's a thing too. And it's just, and how do you deal with that? And then you get children, and they might be atypical as well. And you go, oh, fuck. And that's all, having a therapist or someone help you, or acknowledging that that's normal, is super important. It's a lot of times you can't get out of this by yourself.
No, exactly. And what you just said then, makes me think of, Silvia, what you said about the kind of industry group, just like being able to talk to your peers. I think it's so easy to get trapped inside your own head, right? And not know whether what you're experiencing is normal, for you or for the industry. So, talking to your peers, talking to a therapist, and even just trying to take an account of your own preferences over time. Journaling was something that helped me understand myself and my limits a lot over the years. And one or a combination of all of those things, I think, is definitely really important. And like you said, Tomas, that resilience, I think, comes from understanding that and starting to understand yourself. So let's talk about something again a bit more specific, and that can be very tragicomic. Hopefully you've all had experience of both the plus and the negatives of what I'm about to talk about, and that's reviews and review scores and feedback. Right, I know that everybody responds to them differently. I should have, in hindsight, asked some of you to come prepared with some particularly hilarious Steam reviews, and I'm sure you've had some. But if you can think of any, then great. But otherwise, it can be a big hit to the ego when you read your first kind of like negative reviews on Steam or feedback, wherever it comes from. So, and this is something that everyone in the industry is going to have to go through one way or the other, feedback. So, what are your thoughts and experiences, and then tips, I guess, for dealing with feedback, both positive and negative?
When we did So You're Being Hunted, there was one review on a major site which absolutely hammered the game. I think it gave it 2 or 3 out of 10.
Oof. Roasting.
And what was fascinating about it for me personally is the review wasn't really about the game. It was about the personal disappointment of the author in me. He disliked the game so much he felt that I had personally let him down, because he'd been following me as a reviewer and through PC Gamer and Rock Paper Shotgun, and he wrote about how he'd always felt that we were simpatico in terms of what we enjoyed, and he took a great deal of what he'd learned about the industry from the stuff that I had done, and he'd always been inspired by my writing, and he felt that So You're Being Hunted was just so terrible that it negated and diminished all of that. And it's like like one of his heroes had turned around and slapped him in the face, kind of thing.
I'm a living a lie moment.
Yeah, which was extraordinary to read, because on the one hand it was like, oh, I've really affected someone's life, brilliant, like someone's actually been reading my stuff, and I've always been very solipsistic with the reading. I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day and sort of saying, I don't ever think about there being an audience when I'm writing stuff. I write a lot of stuff just for myself, which is never published, and I write it in the same voice and in the same kind of, with the same kind of level of thought as to something that will get blurted out on Twitter or published in a book or whatever else. I never. So when people do turn around and go, "Oh, I actually read that," it just seems, really? Where did you read? Oh, it's been published in a magazine. That was where you read it. So seeing that someone had been affected by that, listen to it, was on the one hand kind of, wow, brilliant. But his disappointment, like his visceral anger at the game, was quite the thing.
And people get quite angry, don't they? Viscerally angry if you deliver something which was not what they expected. Then you're garbage. It's like,
yeah. I have some sympathy for that, right? Because I think one of the magical things about games is people No Man's Sky, I think, is like the epitome of this. Is where you offer like an idea, and the imagination of gamers immediately takes over. Like, they can see the potential in that idea, they can see where it would go, they can see what they would do if they were that creative director, or you make it multiplayer, you'd add co-op, you'd do this, and suddenly they have this like kind of chain reaction of imaginative, and that's the kind of the strength of games, right? Like, they capture people's imagination, and immediately that imagination goes to work, and it is almost always
I know. So that is the danger of marketing as well. Is that I know for the Falconeer, I wouldn't do it the same way, because the marketing was very, it's an action fantasy, epic, and it is all that. And then people played it. It's a pretty hardcore World War II flight sim type game. And there's been so much hate for that. The people just disappointed that it wasn't what they thought it would be. And literally, you go to Steam, you look at the negative. It's all, I was so hyped for this game, and then the controls or whatever it is, it's like one of the after the disappointment they have. It makes me want to release something and go, look, here it is, it's done. Just go. Here, take it, play it, and if you like it, pay for it. If you don't, no. But it can be so. I had one fellow game. I asked some people for advice. One fellow had played the game, said, "Well, first of all, congratulations, blah blah. But man, this has nothing to do with the Falcon. I've been thinking about a Falcon game for ages, and they dive at 100 kilometers. This has nothing to. It's like a World War I airplane game. That's what I made. So it's like the people have such internalized expectations based on what they get fed, that when we're now talking about, I can't say other stuff and other future releases, part of communicating what it specifically precisely is, so that there's this, but then it is also a sort of a personal failure. So okay, you made something and it's not for everybody.
But that's surely okay, right? You can't make something for everyone.
I think a lot of gamers expect every game for it to be them nowadays. Everybody loves that perfect indie experience. You pick it up and it's so doing something explicitly niche is dangerous, yeah, and especially nowadays, it is a very dangerous thing to do, and that is that needs to be a choice. And then, but I have never done it on the cuts. I've released games and they've all been sort of we released a PlayStation VR thing and nobody ever played it, I think. So it's stuff like that. But for the Falconeer, there was quite a bit of hype going on. So it was the first time people were picking it up. So that has a specific dark side to it. If there's, people anxiously talking about it and then release, and then there's bound to be like a how do you call it? A blowback from that.
Backlash. Silvia, you've worked publisher side and on the social media, right? So maybe you have a bit of a different perspective on this. Like, how does your perspective differ? And then also, how do you or indeed, do you or do you not take that kind of thing personally? How do you get past it all?
So I do agree with Thomas. Sorry, is it Thomas? Thomas.
It's whatever. I don't mind.
I agree with what you said about marketing playing a big part in the way gamers are going to perceive your game. So they set certain expectations, and so I agree with part of that. I think community and social will also play a big part in it, although that's kind of part of marketing. But the thing with reviews is, of course, you have kind of the press reviews and you have the player reviews. And for me, at least as a community manager, the player reviews are really important because while we can't really make a game that is going to be for everyone, you do still want to take some things into consideration. Obviously, you're not going, like, if you get the really ragey one that just says, for example, when Epic started buying exclusives, we were obviously kind of, as community managers, we were on the front side of that and getting a lot of hate that wasn't really related to the game, and it wasn't really anything that we could change. So obviously you kind of, I don't want to say compartmentalize it, but you kind of put it in a block and you say, okay, this is all this hate that is coming from Epic exclusives. We can still pass on the feedback, but is much going to be done about that? We don't know. But things like, small bugs, the direction of a specific game, maybe we can change. So I do really take those to heart. I don't take them as personal anymore, and I think that helps. Being on a publisher side, it's both a negative and a positive. You can't really work as much as you want on a specific game as a community manager. So you kind of take them a bit personal, but at the same time you have to move on to the next game. So you pass that feedback on, and you kind of continue working with the community to see what it is that they want and how much of that you can actually implement from the game dev from the game studio side.
Do you think? Sorry to interrupt. Go on.
Go on.
I was just going to say,
go on.
Do you think that's like a model maybe for dealing with feedback? Thinking about it in terms of sifting with a very pragmatic eye what can actually theoretically be changed, and then as either the community managers passing it on or as the developers, like, well, do we want to change it, and ignoring the rest. But I'm also really curious about how it makes you all viscerally feel, because I remember the first couple of negative responses to things I'd done. The first ones were articles, journalism, games journalism, and then when my first trailer that I'd worked on and then first game came out, by and large it reviewed well and stuff. None of them kind of tanked, but there was still some negative reviews, and I remember at the time it really only made me feel angry, rather than sad or anything. I've got that stubborn streak where it's more like, if you don't like it, then fuck you kind of thing. But again, I wonder if that's something that's very common, or if people react differently. Like on a visceral level, how do you all feel when you read some, fair enough kind of thing, bad feedback?
Personally, I think that when I released Falconeer, I had a major down period. I think I was out of it for weeks. There was great reviews, and then there were some really hateful reviews. I remember one that said that started with, "I don't even realize or understand why this game even needed to be made." So that was the opening of the review, and it ended, "If this game were I see I've internalized it, $3.99 or a free-to-play mobile game, I'd happily recommend it." So it went on to trash the game, and then but if it were free, or in my opinion, this game would. So it went on to tell everybody this is what it's worth. Instead of saying this is worth your money, it's saying no, this is only worth this, which I found very ethically, that is involving yourself with my way of making a living. But so those they just, said once, those stick with you for a week. A good review, it goes, Eurogamer, it's majestic. Oh, you look majestic. Marketing's going wild on Skype. This kid or this one guy on a shitty size, this is garbage. You go, and I couldn't help myself. I literally couldn't. I had no defense against it. And since then, I've what Silvia said about, I've responded to nearly every negative remark anywhere. I think if you go on Reddit or Twitter or Discord or Steam, every fucking remark that I've responded in my kill 'em with kindness. Well, sorry to hear. Can you explicit? And then gone back to say, hey, I've actually patched this in or updated. And it's gone to the stage that my marketing side, I would like for your next release for you to never ever again do that. It is mentally, and I can't understand how community managers do it, because it is mentally such a drain. Because it's nearly infinite. When you jump on something and then someone else will jump in and say, oh, and this and shit, and this is shit, and this is shit. And once that negativity starts to roll, that's all you can perceive. So you stop seeing the positives, and the negatives always shouting louder anyway. And that becomes your entire internalized. So I think I spent, because that is my solution, is to work harder and work harder. Spent the first 6 weeks doing 8 hours a week, just patching, fixing, upgrade. They want this, they want that. Okay, I'll do that. Do more content, just do it, which is fucking unhealthy. Coupled with, am I going to survive of this financially? Can I, do this again? Can I afford my family? All that's getting compressed in a 1 month. And after that, I took some distance, and I think the Cloudpunk guy said, "Well, you'll hate it for 3 months, and then you'll love it again." I think I'll second that, but say, you'll hate it for 6 months, and then you'll start loving it again. But it's I wish we could do without. I personally, for our next game, I try to distance myself of it completely. I know lots of, in other arts, people do that. I don't read reviews, or, I think, wow, that's such a mature thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I think I have a kind of built-in resilience to that stuff, because I was one of the people writing those reviews. Because my background is press, so I had already spent 10 years seeing how people, both players and so on, and also developers would react to reviews, and so I was very ready for it, in the sense that I think the great lesson for me from that whole period was just how far subjectivity goes. So that what is a fantastic game for one person is a total anathema for another. So that you always have to take that as within, whatever they express is filtered by a journey that they've had that you will never know. But also, I think there's an earnestness to that response that there's a degree to which I think it's certainly when I was writing my earliest reviews, and I would get that kind of feedback, and people would say, "Oh, this guy's terrible. He can barely string a sentence together." And I would take it so personally, and I'd get angry with them, because it would feel like they were being deliberately cruel or malevolent. But a lot of the time, it's just simply an honest expression of just a reaction that they've had that is informed by a whole bunch of stuff that is not related at all to. And this isn't quite related to it, but thinking to what you were saying, Thomas, reminded me of, I reviewed a major game, and this is a long time ago now, maybe 15 years ago, maybe a bit longer, and it was so bad that, and I was invited to the studio. It was a big studio, it was a AAA game, and the game was so bad that I played I can't remember how many hours. I sat there the afternoon. And I just had to stand up and say, I've just seen enough. I've got to leave. And they knew, because they were sat behind me watching me going, what the hell is this? And they marched me around the studio to meet all the people who would be hurt or upset by my negative review. This is so-and-so from production. This is, and I'll just never forget that sequence of events where I was, I really felt for these people because I knew I was going to slate this thing that they'd worked on for 2 years, but I had to, because I had to give my honest take on what that game was. And now when I see people say that my game's a big pile of shit, I think, okay, as long as you're honestly, responding to it with how you feel and your take on it, then I can't get angry about that.
And that is the profound truth: is that people will dislike your game, and you might have made something that in areas isn't good, or isn't as good as your fucking goggles assumed it would be. And for me, it's always been this will be fine. I hate making tutorials. Nobody likes tutorials. Everybody skips tutorials, man. And that's something. And now there's 1,000, reviews and tweets about people. I don't understand what the fuck this game. How it's fucking supposed to work? It's because Thomas doesn't like fucking tutorials. Hates writing tutorials. Hates making them. And that blows up in your face. And like I said, honestly, that you need to own. You need to go. Okay, yeah, I failed here. That is a failure as a developer to do something you should have done. And that it's not their fault. It can still fucking hurt. It's still fucking going to break you up inside. And then it's, like I said, it's always anger at yourself. So I think that's very true for anybody starting out having their first reviews. These people are honestly, they're not trying to troll you. There's those that try to troll you. But there is a lot of people who just frustrated because they wanted it to be good. Or they wanted to understand it and they weren't able to. And then they get upset. So I do always respond to that and then explain, it's just me. And then people go, yeah, well, tell the team that makes it. I go, well, there's actually no team. But I'll put it on my list and I'll come back the week later. I fixed it. It's coming in an update. I try to use that as, but it's true. Lots of people have now. It is eventually, ultimately, it's your fault. Sometimes,
but that's okay, right? I mean, and I think this is key to receiving bad feedback. Is exactly as you said, Thomas. It is your fault and you can take ownership of it, but it's not the end of the road. It's like, it's very difficult, probably impossible to make something that is perfect, especially first time round. But the important thing is, and I think this is, for me anyway, the difference between fragility and resilience. Fragility is fixating on that thing forever, right, and never addressing it. And then internalizing it and just believing and giving up. And resilience is going, like you said, I screwed up, but now I'm going to go and fix it. I'm going to make it better and then hopefully learn for next time.
Well, I'm never going to make tutorials.
Or just never worry about it. But even so.
Yeah, I think that's true, but there's like, you say fragility, but there's a beautiful side of that. It's vulnerability. It's that you put something out into the world in which, depending even if you're, a 300-man crew or a 2-man crew or a 1-man crew, you're going to put all your heart and soul in it because that's what you do as a creative person. And then you're going to put it out there with, all your emotional baggage, all your your projections of what it could be, your dreams and expectations, and it's going to be trashed, but you still do it, and that is as vulnerable as going out and say, well, I had a burned out, and or I am neuroatypical, or I am gay or anything. It's just exposing your inner world to the world, and just say, well, I'll take your dark shit and to be part of that. So it's. Fragility isn't always, it's always not necessarily a bad thing. You can always be fragile and vulnerable and say, well, deal with it. But there's a certain beauty in it as well. You having done it,
Absolutely.
It's out there.
Well, I think, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, just expanding on that point, there is a certain level to which fragility also means there's a certain level of flexibility. If you are absolutely stubborn and, set in your way and you're never going to make tutorials, or whatever it might be, then there's stuff there where I think like a lot of the feedback I got early on definitely changed my approach. I remember when I started writing magazine stuff, I was terrible. Right, my writing was really bad. But I think I was young enough and flexible enough at that point, and it really hurt the the feedback that I got, that people were just saying, your writing's awful. That I worked to get past it and fix it. And I think as you go on, there are some things that you don't, you fix in stone. And I don't make tutorials either, so I don't think I'll ever reach a point where making them is okay, because it's not. I wish all games were. When you first played Minecraft before it was Microsofty, and you were just you dropped in, and then you had to watch a YouTube video to like, what the hell's going on? That's what I want games to be like, to have that level of exploration. But I can absolutely see, on the other hand, why people line up to tell you why you should have a thing that tells people how to play, because
that's a lot of people. Well,
a lot of people are different.
You can see the numbers on some platforms on what age bracket is playing your game, and the Falconeer's most popular 35 to 45, which is weird for an action game. And I fear it's exactly that. If there's an older generation that likes game, you'll figure it out. That's part of the fun. And I think that's very old-fashioned for a lot of people. Where they want what's the word of it? It's not simplified, but
streamlined
experience where you just smoothly.
But was that a thing, right? Where during our formative period, there might, if we'd have grown up 20 years later, during our formative period, we might have been influenced to a point where tutorials were a thing that we internalized as important. But like we've reached a certain age where we've just said no, they're not important, and now they never can be, because we aren't in that place where we can be affected by it.
I wonder. Sorry, go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, it is off topic, but I do believe there's like waves in our industry, and we're in a wave where everything is becoming very similar. So every shooter has very similar mechanics. There's everything is very streamlined and condensed into paradigms that are very fixed for genres. Whereas maybe 10 years people were experimenting. You had lemmings and all kinds of genres that's died, and I do believe that'll just we're at the top of the crest where everything has to be, where you pick up an Xbox and it needs to feel like every Halo needs to feel like the previous Halo, needs to feel like Battlefield. Like, oh, this doesn't have that. Oh, fuck this. And that's a very narrow-minded perception looking at games, and it's just going to go away in a bit. And then we're going to have a freer period, and then so I don't mind. I think that's just a sign of the times, as it were.
Yeah, I wonder if, and Silvia, it'd be good to hear your thoughts on this. Again, you're on the front lines, and then also working, just all the different things you've worked on. Maybe you've got a good eye on this. Do you think that, just as Thomas has just said, the industry trends and genres, and maybe even, and not at all in a derogatory way, the audience has become more fragile and less resilient due to just all the trends and market forces at play, or do you think something else?
By that, do you mean like the players have become more accustomed to getting what they want?
Yeah, both of that, and just generally, as Jim was saying, so I don't know exactly how old you are, but I remember this too, being dropped in, at the deep end with games back in the day, and having to just figure it out. There wasn't internet tutorials or YouTube, or tutorials of any kind. So maybe older gamers have got a bit of that gaming resilience from having to just tough it out back in the day, and of course, if a younger audience has grown up, as you said, more accustomed to getting their way through constant back and forth communication with developers, and also there being more tutorials for everything, maybe there is just that bit of resilience. It's not their fault, but maybe there's a bit of resilience lacking.
I think, it feels like a cop-out answer, but I think there's just many different types of people. I personally kind of like tutorials, but they need to be well done. So it doesn't need to be kind of your separate tutorial that you go into and it says this is how you play the game. It's just you start a game and that there are small hints here and there of how to play it. And I think, obviously, I have kind of a limited view because I don't know every gamer out there, but I think so far people or players, it's kind of reflected in the players as well. So you'll get the players that like tutorials, you'll get the players that need that kind of hand holding in their games, and you'll get the ones that are that just want to kind of figure things out themselves. That is also really interesting, to kind of just drop in a game and then not have a tutorial. And it also helps you as a developer. If a person is not being guided through your game, it also helps them do things in a way that you did not expect. So you'll get, to go back to the feedback thing, you'll get kind of varied feedback in that sense. Whereas if you have a guided way, if you have a tutorial, you're going to get kind of very similar feedback. But to kind of answer your question, I think, I don't think there is that much of a trend of people or players wanting things their way or like being accustomed to getting things their way. You'll get just so many different people. You'll get so many different players depending on the game that you make. Of course, you'll get the ones that don't understand your game and they'll write really terrible feedback because they didn't understand the aim. And I think it's important to kind of go back also again to burning out and everything. I think it's important to not change absolutely everything just because your audience is telling you to. I think you need to stay true to also the vision of your game. And I think that also helps players understand this is your game, this is how you wanted it to be, but have some kind of leniency on certain things that you want to change.
Awesome. I think that's very, very sound advice. Thank you. We're already coming up to the end of our time. It's flown by and there's a million more questions I'd love to ask all of you. But maybe we can just wrap it up with a one-liner, more or less from each of you on your top tip for building resilience. Because, resilience is a trajectory. So if there was one thing you could advise people to do to build resilience, what would that be? I'm looking at who maybe has the answer on the tip of the tongue. Jim?
I'll have one.
Thomas, go on.
I think for a large part of before I had my burnout, I was doing a lot of things where instinctually I felt I didn't actually want to do those things. Worked for clients I might not have wanted to work for, but felt there was a need financially or within the microcosm of a company to do certain things or to do certain things in a certain way. And that kept, I always felt that, felt squeezed in a way. I think that is one of the things, if you want to be resilient, that you have to learn is listen to whatever's inside your body and your mind telling you this is good or right. And if you start ignoring things, that's when the burnout will come.
I want to say, play video games. When I had my burnout, I had basically stopped playing games because I was 100% focused on the game we were making, and I never made time for doing almost anything else. And in all previous parts of my life, I had fenced off areas for goofing off with pals. That I can't remember who said it now. One of the American game academics. He said, that goofing around with your buddies in games should be regarded as sacred, and I think it is, and that stuff has helped me through a whole bunch of periods. Like when I first went freelance, I was working from home and I didn't see anyone all day. I played EVE Online so that I had people to be chatting to all day while I was working. Because it was that kind of environment where there was still somebody there, and I could stop and play the game for a little while. And that kind of support, that which is it's very low level. It's not going to it's not kind of pouring your heart out. It's not, but just having something that isn't the thing that is eating up all of your ability and attention, going and doing something else. And all of us are in the games industry, right? We all love games. Don't forget that, and remember to use them as the space to escape into that they're supposed to be. They can be a part of that, and you shouldn't feel guilty about doing that either, because it's part of who you are. So go and do it.
Yeah, I agree with both of those things, and also to kind of build up on that. Also, the idea of listening to your body is top notch, but also listening to other people, and I mentioned that at the beginning, not just within the industry, but also outside of it. So it kind of builds in with the goofing around with your buddies and playing games with your buddies. People outside of the industry might be able to ground you in a way that also builds resilience, in a way that also makes you realize certain things I can't achieve, and that's okay.
Amazing. Yeah, top tips all around. Well, thank you all so much for joining me for this episode. It's been an absolute delight.